Please welcome Hamid El-Assami back to the stage to introduce our keynote speaker.
We're very lucky that Dr. Robert Wallace accepted to be our keynote speaker for our inaugural graduation in Baltimore. He's an accomplished engineer, entrepreneur, author, keynote speaker, internationally known business consultant. He's routinely sought after by the business community, and through this activity has gone to create 3 successful companies: Bit Technologies, Bit Energy, and Entre Teach Learning Systems LLC. On a personal note, I met Robert Wallace one morning, and he came and speak to our students, and it was fascinating for what he did for 30 minutes. He basically told the students, I have some very, very short and small formula for you to succeed. And he threw it on the board, and all that the students remember now are the quadrant. You know what I'm talking about. And so we're very, very lucky to have him as a supporter. He's also supporting us in introducing us to key of his business partners in the city of Baltimore, and we are honored to have him as our first keynote speaker.
Good afternoon. Young people, do you know that we are in the midst of an economic war? There is economic war being waged right now in this country and around the world. And so the world that you are inheriting is a war of economic proportions. And those who are unprepared to fight that war will become victims. And therefore, all of us should be directed to become economic warriors. And so my comments today to you would be about what it takes to become an economic warrior, because that is the environment that you are inheriting today. And so, as I said in the class that we had, and I may cover some things that we covered in that class, because I think it's important, is that the way to become an economic warrior is to think, act, and perform like an entrepreneur. So whether you work for Bit Technologies or Morgan Stanley or T. Rowe Price or whoever it is, the way to prepare yourselves for this economic engagement is to think, act, and perform like an entrepreneur. And so what I want to give you today is I want to go back to those who were at my session we had a few months ago and those who may not have been there, is to give you again some perspectives on those 4 areas that I have found are critical to becoming a successful entrepreneur. Now, I know you're being groomed to find jobs, and that's okay. But there's a coming time in this world, in this nation, where entrepreneurs, there's this revolution coming. It's called entrepreneurship. And so you and I need to be ready and prepared to assume that battle. And so what I want to give you today is 4 lessons, 4 stories from that 4-quadrant model that we talked about in the class. For those who weren't there, I'll cover that briefly for you. And that is this. Number 1 is there are 4 quadrants we found from the research for successful entrepreneurs. Okay, and so when I was a grad student at Dartmouth at the Tuck School of Business, I did research on minority and women entrepreneurs, and I found that there were 4 areas of focus that they all had to pay attention to in order to become successful entrepreneurs. And I'm going to give you those 4 quadrants very, very quickly and talk to you about the learning and lessons from each one. They are, quadrant 1 is to know thyself. Know thyself, right? And the quadrant 1 of knowing thyself says that you and I are the cornerstones of any human endeavor that we engage in. So therefore we must know ourselves. Quadrant 2, know thy plan. You got to have a plan to get you from the present to the future. Quadrant 3 is know thy universe, which talks about the principles of success and understanding what they are in the environment in which you operate. And then quadrant number 4 says to know thy resources and make them thy own. Know thy resources and make them thy own. So as I start with quadrant number 1, young people, It is to know thyself. That requires a focus on the spiritual self, the physical self, and yes, the intellectual self. Now, I will tell you a story that to me brings that together for me in a very powerful way. I'm from Baltimore. Any Baltimore kids here? Raise your hands. You're all from Baltimore, right? Okay. I'm from Baltimore. A place called Cherry Hill. Any Cherry Hill kids here? Any Cherry Hill folks here? Well, you should be from Cherry Hill, but it's okay. So in Cherry Hill, I'll show my age here. In Cherry Hill back in the 60s, there was Cherry Hill, which is a low-income neighborhood in South Baltimore. There was Cherry Hill, and there was a neighborhood called Brooklyn, right? Now, back in the 60s, Cherry Hill was predominantly African-American, and Brooklyn was predominantly white. And what divided the two neighborhoods was these railroad tracks, right? That was what we called that was no man's land, right? And so we would call each other names across the tracks. I'd be called the N-word, and we would call them the H-word. And so we had this skirmishes across the track. But there was this big sign on the track that said no trespassing, being on a railroad, no trespassing. Mom and Daddy told me, boy, do not go on those tracks, because the big sign said no trespassing. So what did we do? We went on tracks, amen. We went on tracks, right? So one day we went on tracks, and I was with my friends, and I was a leader among my peers. I was about 13, 14 years of age. And we were playing on the tracks, throwing rocks at the stakes and all that. And there were these two men walking down the track. So the rest of my friends from Cherry Hill, they ran, right? They were smart, they ran. But what did Bob Wallace do? He tough guy, right? I'm sure how tough I was. So I didn't run. And as a matter of fact, I walked between the two men to show how tough I was from Cherry Hill, 13-year-old boy, right? Well, it turned out that these two men were railroad police. So you can imagine, I was handcuffed and taken to downtown Baltimore. Well, back in the old days, if you were a juvenile and you were locked up, they would take you before a judge of some type, or some kind of adjudicator or something, and he or she would determine whether you would go to court or be released to your parents. So we had this meeting with this guy to determine whether I would be prosecuted or whether I would be released to my parents. Now, I was hoping that Daddy would be able to make that meeting, because Daddy worked at Bethlehem Steel, but Daddy couldn't make the meeting, so Mama had to make the meeting. Now, my mom, I'm not sure what y'all's backgrounds are, but my mom was a recovering alcoholic. And if you know anything about alcoholics or drug addicts, you know that they are very comfortable telling you what they think in any given situation. So I had to so Mom had to take me down to meet with this guy. So we're in his office downtown Baltimore, back in the 60s. And Mom was trying to explain to this man what happened. Well, he wouldn't hear it. Big old guy, nasty, rude. And as he was there speaking to my mother as if she was a child, I kept wishing Daddy was there. Because my daddy was a boxer. And I knew Daddy would knock him out, okay? But Mama, even though she was recovering alcoholic, Mama held her tongue. Because Mama knew that that man at that moment had the power to determine whether her son, me, would be going to the court system, right, and become another casualty, or be released to her. So Mama sat there, she stood there, and she took it. She took the abuse, she took the rudeness and disrespect. And I wanted to jump over the table at that guy so bad, Mama would put her hand on my lap and said, son, calm down, just be quiet. So the man got his thing out, what he had to say, and finally he said, okay, Miss Wallace, I will release your son to your custody, but he better stay off the tracks. So Mom and I walk out the office, we get into the car, we're driving back to Cherry Hill. I looked over at Mama, and Mama had tears coming down the side of her face. And I made a decision in my life at that moment. And I said this, I said I would never do anything again that would bring disrespect and pain and honor to my mother and my father. And that led me, beyond that point, to take life seriously, about knowing thyself. Because that was, for me, the defining moment of knowing thyself and being the best that I could be at what I had to do. Now, quadrant 2 tomorrow talks about know thy plan. The plan is the bridge. The bridge gets you from the present to the future. How many of you here want to be bigger, better, best at what you do? Come on, all hands should go up. Bigger, better, best. That's the American way, right? To be bigger, better, best. But what it takes is a plan. A plan to get you from the present to the future. So young people, you gotta have a plan to get you there. Now, when I was in high school, I went to Polytech High School in Baltimore. Any Poly grads here? Okay, very good. I got one, all right. Poly grad there. I was at Poly. Before I went to Poly, I'd gone to school, all schools in Cherry Hill, all, African American classmates. When I went to Poly, it's the first time I had gone to an integrated school in Baltimore, Polytech. Right? I was studying to be an engineer. And so, so this was an opportunity to meet new friends and all that. I met a friend who lived in Roland Park. Anybody from Roland Park, folks here? Okay, I didn't live at the time in Roland Park, but my friend was from Roland Park, and we became friends. So one day he had an event at his home, and he invited me to his home for the weekend. So I go from Cherry Hill to be with my friend in Roland Park. What an awakening that was for me. First of all, we went to his bedroom, right? Every child, there were 3 siblings, every child had their own bedroom, right? And every child had their own bed, right? There were 5 of us in Cherry Hill, all in one little bedroom, the size of a bathroom today, my bathroom today, right? And then each bed had what I thought back then were 2 mattresses. I said, look at this. Well, I know now it was a mattress in a box. But I couldn't understand why he had 2 mattresses. And we had these thin mattresses on army bunks, right? In the projects, right? We went downstairs, they had a kitchen, they had a dining room, a family room, a living room, a mud room, a butler, all these rooms, right? And we had a kitchen and a room. I said, look here, look at this, right? They had air conditioning. They had central air conditioning in the house. We had air that was conditioned. And they had furniture, but they had no plastic on the furniture. See, Mom and Daddy would buy furniture and keep it for 30 years, and to do that, they put plastic on the furniture and dared you to sit on the furniture. They went downstairs to watch TV, right? And they had real color TV. They had an actual color TV. See, back in the old days, if you couldn't afford a real color TV, what you would do is you could buy this colored paper, right? And you would take the paper around the front of the black and white TV, and it made you think you had a color TV, right? I said, look at here, look at here. Then we had breakfast, right? And at breakfast we had milk, right? They had milk in a bottle. We had milk in a cardboard box called powder milk. It's called welfare milk. Right? The kind you add water to and you stir it around and you have lumps in it and all that. That's what we had, right? And they had name brand cereal. So that evening we had dinner, and I sat next to my friend's father. I said, sir, tell me something. I said, sir, what do you do for a living? He said, Bob, I'm an engineer. I said, got it. Then I said, sir, well, how do you make enough money to live like this? He said, Bob, I own my own business. I said, got it. Engineer, own your own business, right? It's no mistake today that Bob Wallace is an engineer and owns his own business. Because that day, my friend's father helped me to see the future. I came back to Cherry Hill that Sunday night, said, Mom and Daddy, I love you. I know you're trying real hard, but I have seen the future. And I want it, and I want the future. So that's quadrant 2, knowing thy plan, because that became my destination point then. Engineer and own your own business. Quadrant number 3 says this. It says to know thy universe. What that means is this, that there are rules of success and engagement that you need to understand in whatever work you're doing to be successful. When I came to IBM in the 80s, after graduate school, I went in, I'd gone to Dartmouth business school, and I came in with my blue blazer, and I had some charcoal slacks on, I had on some loafers, and a nice print tie. I got through one day of IBM, and as I was leaving for that day, I got a call from my manager. She said, come see me, Bob. She said, Bob, we're glad you're here, we love you, we think you'll do well at IBM. She said, only one problem. She said, if you want to be successful in IBM, you got to change how you dress. In IBM, we wear suits. The jacket matches the pants. We wear black shoes, We wear a nice conservative tie and a white shirt. She said, if you want to be successful at IBM, that is what you have to do. The rules of engagement. What are the rules of engagement where you're operating, where you want to be successful? Quadrant 3 addresses those things. And then Quadrant 4 talks about knowing thy resources and making your own. Beloved, you and I cannot be successful by ourselves. We need to have alliances and partnerships. And therefore, you must be very intentional about building alliances and partnerships. Very, very key. I've written a book on that, which you will be very glad to see a part of it, and we can go through some details there at a later time. But those are the 4 quadrant rules, all right? So in terms of becoming economic warriors, what we need to do is to look at those 4 quadrants and focus on them on a daily basis to become economic warriors. Because the world you are inheriting requires that we be economic warriors. So as I move to conclude my comments here, I want you to remember that as you leave here, wherever you go to work, whether you work for a company or for yourselves, those 4 quadrants are critical. And I'm reminded of that because when I was, one thing that was not mentioned is that in my company, we're committed, we take a portion of our profits each year and we plow it back into mission projects all over the world, in Africa, Latin America, in Asia, and other parts like that. And so we were recently in Liberia, and we had gone there to put in some water systems and some sewer systems and all. And if you don't know much about Liberia, Liberia was in a 14-year civil war, just came out of the war, and we were going to help rebuild the country. We'd been there for a week. Our last day there, we were out in one of the war-torn cities called Harper City, and we were interviewing the senators from the Senate of Liberia. And I was there with my team from America, and you can see the poor people all around walking back and forth. The town is bombed out. Buildings all bombed out, right? So we're interviewing the senator, and I'm noticing this little girl, about 8, 9 years old, watching us. So finally she walks over to me. Of all the men in the room, in the courtyard, she walks over to me. And she says something in her native tongue that I did not understand. And so I asked my host, I said, what did she say? He said, Mr. Wallace, she says she wants to pray for you. I said, oh really? He said, yes sir, she wants to pray for you. Now, this little girl, 8, 9 years old, right? She had sores all over her body, from her head to her toe. She had a scarf on her head, had lost all her hair, had the smell. You know, poverty has a smell, you know. Suffering has a smell, has an odor to it. She had the smell. And she came up to me, she said, sir, I want to pray for you. Now, I must admit, at first I thought it was a scam. You know, you pray for me, then I give you money, then you go away, right? That wasn't the case. I looked her in the eye and she said it again, sir, I want to pray for you. And I said, wow. I said, well, why did she pick me? Of all the people in that courtyard, why did she pick Bob Wallace? Don't know. I said, I'll tell you what. I said, baby girl, I'll tell you what. I don't know what you see or what premonition you may have, but you guess what? I will let you pray for me. So I took off my hat. It was a hot, sunny, tropical place. I'm sweating like crazy, like I am now. And she puts her hand on my head, and she begins to pray for me in her native tongue. And by this time, I'm a wreck. I'm a mess. I'm crying like a baby because I'm like, what's going on here? And so my point to you is this, is that this little girl who broke all cultural norms at that time, it's unusual for a girl to approach a stranger, first of all, let alone approach a man. That was unusual. That was a breaking of the cultural norm. And for her to take that step and do that was pretty amazing. And so I'm saying to you, as you and I, as you leave here and graduate, as I go back to my office and figure out our next move in our company, guess what? We need to have the same kind of intentionality that this young girl had with me. You got to break all cultural norms. You got to do the unexpected, and you cannot be afraid. And I learned that from that little girl that day. Maybe one day I'll see her in heaven, I don't know. But I learned that from her that day, and I pass that on to you for whatever it's worth. God bless you. Thank you very much.